what students were looking at in terms of wanting online or hybrid classes, we're really starting to see that in the credentialing now as well. So graduate certificates, so meaning something that is less than a full master's degree, we're seeing continue to grow in popularity. So it's been about a 10% increase since fall of 21, and looking at a 5%, 6%, almost 5.7% year over year increase. Seeing a little bit more success as well when those certificates are stackable, meaning that you can get several of them to lead towards a full master's degree. So looking at the trends now more on the programmatic demographic side. Next slide, please. There you go. Awesome. Thanks. We can see the broad fields of education, business, and health sciences experienced the largest growth, making up 45% of all new graduate enrollment in the fall of 22. So I like to put that little caveat asterisk there when we talk about business, because that is everything but the MBA. The MBA has continued its decade-long decline. One thing to note, though, is while it's been a pretty steady 1.2% decrease year over year for about the past 10 years, we saw a really big drop at 5.4% this past year. Now, one data point doesn't indicate a trend, so we're not sure if this is an outlier and it's going to go back to kind of that steady decline, or if we're really starting to see this decline become something that's speeding up quite a bit. Something to note, coinciding with the Supreme Court ruling, the SCOTUS ruling this past year, first-time enrollment by underrepresented minorities dropped after 2 years of really strong double-digit growth, which was really disappointing to see. Specifically for Black students, enrollment dropped 7.8%, and Latinx student enrollment dropped by 5.7%. So again, same as with the MBA, 1 year, one data point does not indicate a trend, but it is something to keep a really close eye on, as so many institutions are really making diversity recruitment a priority. And then first-time graduate enrollment dropped almost double among women than men year over year. So 5.8% decrease for female students. So again, something to keep a really close eye on as we're talking just from a demographic standpoint of who's entering the academy at the graduate level. Moving on to undergraduate enrollment, taking a look at the increase from 2022, fall 2022 to fall 23. There was a 2.1 increase in total undergraduate enrollment. This was the first increase post-pandemic, so it was good to see retention rates coming back a little bit, but first-year enrollment dropped 3.6% overall. You can see here the graph to the right, it really kind of depended on what type of an institution you were at. So public 4 years taking a little bit bigger of a hit at that 6.1% decrease, where private, nonprofit 4 years seeing a little bit of growth. One thing that's really interesting to see is that undergraduates are really starting to look for flexibility in their credentialing as well. So 9.9% growth in undergrad certs, fall of 2022 to fall of 23. Again, there's a strong job market. We've always known that then hurt graduate enrollment, but I think we're starting to see that trickle down a little bit onto the undergrad side as well, as people are looking for those kind of micro credentials that will help them either get a job or advance in their career without necessarily going for that full bachelor's degree right off the bat. So much has been made about our top bullet point right here, right? Is it an enrollment cliff? Is it a demographic shift? Does anybody really know what the heck is happening? I think that the answer is yes, yes, and yes across the board, and we'll dive into that a little bit more on the next slide. But we'll also see that it's really all local, right? We're seeing a migration away from regional publics to flagships and land-grant institutions. And then I'll get a little bit more of, we've been here before, sort of, and I'll explain a little bit more what that means. Next slide, please.
Super quick, because I do believe it is relevant. Becky has asked, what is a land-grant institution?
Oh, that's fantastic. So what the official definition is, Becky, I couldn't probably recite it verbatim, but like land-grant institutions, like for the state of Michigan, I'll use mine. You know, the University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State. These are institutions that are in the state of Michigan's charter. They are funded by the state. In the state dollars were set aside for these Texas A&M is one I'm thinking up off the top of my head. So yeah, institutions that set up by the state, they're typically the older institutions in states with very specific missions, whether it was agriculture, teaching colleges, stuff like that. But I can Google you the official definition if you'd like. Awesome, thanks, Riley. All right, so when we talk about this enrollment cliff, it's really not. It's a demographic shift. But what is definitely, hey, somebody threw Wikipedia in there. Thank you, Brad. What is happening in no qualms about it is there will be fewer high school graduates in this next decade than there has been in the previous decade. But where you sit geographically is where you will stand from an enrollment standpoint. So if we take a look, 56% of students at public 4 years attend an institution that's less than an hour away from their home. So you are going to be kind of beholden to the demographics of your local area if you're in a lot of these states. 9 states actually are projected to see growth in high school age graduates from 2025 to 2036. And I love this map because it does show that depending on where you're at within the country, you're going to see varying rates of decline in high school graduates. And in some instances and in some states, there's going to be overall declines, but with pockets of growth, and then vice versa. We see that 28 states have seen their flagships double-digit increases, while those regional publics have seen 5% plus drops. And that's been even more drastic depending on the state you're in. So, for instance, in my home state of Michigan, the University of Michigan and Michigan State have seen double-digit enrollment decreases, where some of the regional publics have seen 15 to 20% enrollment declines. This wonderful map comes from the WICHE data, and I'd highly encourage you to have a great website, great table. You can kind of play with the data and see what's happening. But I think it gives a really good picture in terms of what we're seeing. When I said we've been here before, sort of, this isn't new. So the Gen X baby bust that happened in the early 80s had WICHE projecting from 1979 to 1994 a 25% decrease in the number of high school graduates that were going to be happening. There was projections of the Northeast seeing 40% plus decline in college enrollment. And the dean of the Stanford Business School at the time had called it the new Great Depression for higher ed and forecasted that 10 to 30% of institutions would be forced to close by 1990. That, of course, did not happen. And the reason why is we saw a bunch of new formerly underrepresented groups within higher education come in. So female enrollment increased 20%. The number of international students doubled. Graduate students increased 30%. The relatively new Pell Grant at that time was given a shot in the arm, allowing hundreds of thousands of students that previously couldn't afford to attend a college do so. So I think we kind of look at this and we say, okay, what will be, this new group or this new initiative that kind of helps to offset enrollment? Because instead of seeing these double-digit decreases that we thought we were going to see 79 to 94, it was actually a 23% increase in enrollment during that time. So kind of give a little bit of parallel and context for what we're seeing right now. And at the bottom of the screen there, that 41%, as we look at who might those new faces in the academy be to help offset freshman enrollment. All right, 41% of eligible veterans utilize their post 9/11 GI Bill. That's a lot of people with educational funding that we could be doing a better job of supporting in the academy. And as a sidebar, because we don't have all day to talk, as a veteran myself and somebody that's worked in this space, if you ever have any questions about this or want to learn more about the process for military members and their dependents to get into higher ed, hit me up on Slack. I'd love to have the conversation. So last but not least, moving towards international enrollment. All right, so international enrollment we can see is really trending in the right direction. So for clarification here, when we're talking about international enrollment, we are talking about folks on F1 student visas, which is the type of visa that is predominant for students studying full-time in the United States. So I'm not looking at J1s or TNs or CZs or anything like that. We're just looking at F1 student visas for this data. So international enrollment is continuing its post-pandemic rebound. We've seen 2 straight years of double-digit growth in applications, and a 20% growth in enrollment at the graduate level for international students across all fields of study. Now, that's technically not true. The field of engineering did see a 0.05% decrease, but we'll give engineering a little bit of a break there. So it's really good to see that kind of rebounding post-pandemic. Something old, something new. So on the something old side, China and India continue to dominate in international enrollment in terms of sending countries, but we're seeing some really cool emerging markets in Ghana, Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Colombia, seeing some all-time high growth. That being said, 53% of international students studying in the United States right now do come from the countries of China or India. STEM remains the biggest draw for international students studying in the US because of OPT. OPT stands for Optional Practical Training, and it is the 12 months that a student is allowed to stay in the United States on their F1 student visa after they graduate, that they can get a paid internship or paid job with a company. If you're studying in a STEM designated field, that 12 months is actually eligible for a 36-month extension. So if you're an international student, the ability to stay in the US on your student visa and get paid to work for 3 years is a phenomenal opportunity. Is there anything to say for the increased difficulty for students obtaining visas? I know there's a lot of international applicants. Okay, student visas, yes, getting better. Still not to where they were pre-2016. So that last stat that I have down there, we're taking a look at November, right? If history repeats itself. This is not a political thing. This is just taken from IIE Open Doors report. We do know that in 2016 to 2021, during the Trump administration and the policies that were placed at that point in time, we did see a 15% decline overall in international student enrollment in the U.S. with a 39% visa denial rate. This is significantly higher than it had been in the decade prior, and depending on what region of the world you were coming from, those visa denial rates shot up above 80%. Getting a little bit better now, getting back to normal post-pandemic, but not to where they were pre-2016. I will say that if you want to go to the next slide, Riley, as we look at where students are coming from, India has seen a 35% growth year over year. So while China remains number one, India is hot on China's heels. This can be a little bit of a stabilizing factor for U.S. institutions, because if you have been following it closely, Chinese students have had some visa restrictions put on lately, depending on if you're studying what's considered a sensitive field. So I think the rise from India is kind of a welcome, I should say, welcome fact for a lot of higher institutions as they're looking for stability. Just because, again, Chinese students in visa issuance is kind of always a political hot button as much as it is anything else. So again, next slide, please. I mentioned the countries that are seeing all-time highs. So with India seeing this huge increase, when we're on calls with clients all the time and they're looking at getting into international enrollment, they will frequently like, well, I think we're going to try and get in the game in India because of the number of students they're sending. It's like, okay, you and everybody else. And let's take a look at, it's a big country. There's tier 1 cities, there's 2-tier cities, there's tier 3 cities. What's right for your institution? Where do you play well? I always say it's a delicate balance, and you have to look at the intersectionality between how many students a country is sending. Do you have the majors that they're looking for? And where is that price point that those students can afford compared to either your tuition or your scholarship and aid structure? So these are some of those not top 2 countries that have seen some pretty great growth this past year that I think is really going to be interesting for us to take a look at as we go forward. All right, so a couple big bullet points to take away from the so what of grad, undergrad, and international. So for most of the country, yes, there are projected to be less high school graduates for the next decade. But as we talked about, this decline will not hit everyone, and it will not hit everyone equally. Location and institution type are really going to be the big factors. We're seeing a behavioral shift in the graduate market as younger millennials and Gen Z become our primary customers. These are digital natives. These are the early adopters of Snapchat and TikTok. And I won't get too far into it because I know that there's going to be a marketing trends session as well. But it's something that institutions really have to keep in mind of who their audience is now, as Gen Xers and definitely Boomers are aging out of the population. International enrollment is rebounding, but let's just keep that eye on November and see what happens. And then I think the big question is what or who will help offset traditional FDIAC first time in college enrollment. I think is non-trad, non-traditional the new traditional. I definitely think so. It's going to be an interesting trend to keep an eye on. So while all of this historical data is good, what is even better is when it's paired with real time. So I'm going to pass it over to my partner in crime today, Amanda, to talk about what we're seeing in these trends already for 2024.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Jenna. Yeah, so like Jenna mentioned, everything this session is enrollment trends, but we would be remiss if we didn't give you some peeks at kind of what we're seeing within at least the Slate Communications realm with our partners that we work with for kind of early 2024 data that we have. So we'll be looking at some slides, and we are looking at just clients that do work with Slate Communications. So that's the data that I work with in bulk with the Slate Optimization Communications team. But clients use us as a resource for comparative data, kind of when they're looking at all of the information that Jenna just mentioned, and then saying, okay, well, what's happening right now? What do we need to do right now? That's kind of where those Slate strategists from comms come in, and this is what we're looking at. So I just wanted to do two quick polls at the beginning of this section, our last section of the day, just to see what you think about these things. Kind of who are our Slate Communications clients, and where are they? So would love for you guys to just answer this poll for what you think is the most common region that we have Slate Communications partners in. Jess, I hope you don't get it wrong. Wow. We'll take away your comm mom title. Oh my gosh, never do that. I know. No, we would never do that. We would not survive. Ted, you're right. You got it. Great job. You can close it out. Yeah, I think we can close it out 100%.
Right. So New England is currently running as #1 for you, Amanda.
Interesting. This is what we've got. So again, just Slate Communications partners, right? So this could definitely be different Carnegie wide, Southeast, the Mideast, and the Great Lakes there. Although I will say, I think that little New England guy should be in those Mideast. Some of those, they're so close. They're so close together. So I think if you said that, you win. I think that's fine. No one's ever heard me just like give out a win like that. So it's amazing. Okay. And then also just looking at the same question, but size ranges. What do you guys think are the most common sized institutions that we work with in Slate Communications? We're looking at about, well, I have data on 43 right now, and there's some stragglers out there. So 43 plus, I will say. Yeah. 2,500 to 499. I got it. Cool. So this is our size breakdown, just to give you a little bit of additional information for really who we're talking with, and definitely the region information is relative to what Jenna was talking about. So go ahead and flip to the next slide, Riley. A little bit about the Oh, and I changed this slide, but I see it doesn't update as you're in it. We have 43 partners in total included right now. So again, some stragglers that are still coming into this data. This is a new dashboard that the Slate Communications team has, and your comm strategist can utilize it. But right now we have 43 partners included in total. And we're looking at data from June 1st of 2023 to March 1st. Some of the numbers I updated today because I saw that they changed and I thought it would be fun. So, to date, and the data is not inclusive of any particular campaign. So I think that's helpful because there's, of course, some overlaps. Some of our clients, of course, are integrated clients and have other services with us. So this slide here is going to be a lot to digest, but just sit with it for a little bit, and we're happy to answer any questions. But I'll point out some things. So we have a first year, a graduate, and a transfer column. So added transfer in here, broke out that undergraduate type and kind of went away from domestic versus international, as we don't run a lot of international specific campaigns. A lot of times they are included in our campaigns, but they're segmented to differently at some stages, or the university is doing communication with them in-house, as that's more one-on-one and extremely customized to the student. So it kind of just depends there. But we have the first year, just looking at fall 2024, our prospect to inquiry rate of 10%. So again, not attributed to any sort of campaign we're running, just funnel information overall. We're using created apps here, and then a 5% deposit rate. So all of our deposit rates across the board are going to be looking at admitted to gross deposits. I definitely have some additional information on that deposit rate too, but quickly jumping over to the transfer fall 24. So again, that inquiry to app rate, looking at a student who was an inquiry that moved to a created application. More common with transfer students, we do app completion campaigns. So a lot of times we're tracking that in between a bit more robustly for some clients. So just included an app completion rate in here, and for grad because they're stellar. And then the deposit rates as well. For grad, the 39% inquiry to app rate. For graduate, that one in particular is looking at submitted applications. There's just some various ways that partners are collecting that information. So submitted apps is kind of the most level one to use there. App completion and deposit rate too. So yes, seeing the chat, definitely relevant. The deposit rate is admitted students to gross deposits. So rather than looking at net deposits, so students maybe like it's including students who may have since melted. Definitely looking at those numbers as well, but this is the bulk of where the data is right now, just given the time of the year. I will say with that, oh, go back really quick, Riley. I have one more comment. I'm so sorry. So the deposit rate for the first year, just have some notes on that and just things that the team has seen so far. So overall year to date, we're definitely seeing deposit rates down by about 3% on average, at least with partners that have yield campaigns with us. So that's being talked about a lot, especially with the slow roll of the FAFSA. So it's definitely slowing those deposits down. And for reference, our year-end deposit rate for Slate Comm's partners last cycle, no matter campaign, was 17.5% on average. So that 5 to that 17.5 is that gap really that partners have to close in this time. Okay, the next three charts, I will move through a bit quickly, and that's okay. They're meant to be just kind of visual processing, is just what applications look like by month. So first year, fall 24, we have a couple of different points. The stealth, created, submitted, and completed. If we looked at this for the entire year, we definitely would see this kind of like trickle on through the rest of the year. But Riley, if you go to the next slide, this is going to be transfer. So that's definitely what we typically see is that spike early spring. students kind of coming in late. And so typically the whole year of the transfers has those peaks and valleys because they start at so many different times of the year. And then the last one is graduate as well, just to give you a little visual there of what's happening here. So these are graduate fall 24 by month as well. Okay. That's all for me. I think
Wonderful.
if we have
Thank you,
any
ladies.
seconds for a few questions.
Yes, just a few seconds. I think there is one question that was not addressed, Jenna, and it was back when you were talking about international students, and they asked what is considered to be a sensitive field, and you did reply to the other question. So I think after that we are good.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a really long list, and I can drop a link in there to the website that that you can find all of them. But it's fields like that tend to be like biomedical, engineering, aviation. The term I believe that was used by the federal government is they're concerned about the tech transfer of knowledge leaving the U.S. to foreign governments, particularly in China in this case. But it's a pretty long list. The original executive order was put in place in 2018, and the Biden administration continued to uphold it. So it does still stand. And basically, it makes it for Chinese students studying in these fields, instead of getting a 5-year visa, they get a 1-year visa, which you have to imagine as a student is a pretty risky thing, right? Like you're investing your money to come to the United States, and you're not guaranteed to be able to continue on every single year like you can when you get the typical 5-year visa.
Awesome. I'm sure if you guys have any additional questions, these ladies, their Slack lines are open, so you're absolutely welcome to talk with them about anything. I appreciate you joining us today, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of Carnegie Inside Out. Have a marvelous afternoon.